Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 8th of January 2024, and these are the stories that we will be highlighting during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the terrorist attack that happened on the polio team in northwestern Pakistan in the Mamoon village of Bajaur district, as a result of which 5 policemen were killed, 22 others were injured. The casualties were, of course, the policemen, and as per the media reports, the TTP has claimed to be behind this incident. Not the first incident that has happened as far as our agencies are concerned, or our police personnel are concerned, or our armed forces are concerned. There's a deliberate attempt to not only malign our armed forces but also to attack our armed forces, and this is mainly restricted to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. Who is behind it? Of course, one of the, as we said, the media reports are talking about the TTP behind this incident, but there's the TTP, there's the ISIK, and there are other elements as well, mostly emanating from Afghanistan. We'll be discussing different aspects and highlighting the issues that concern such terrorist incidents and what needs to be done in order to thwart them in the future. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the Israel-Palestine conflict that has now entered its 94th day. 73 Palestinians have been killed, 99 injured in the attacks on Gaza in the past 24 hours. At the same time, Anthony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, is on a whirlwind mission to the Middle East, where he is met with the King of Jordan, who he has assured that the displaced Gazans will be allowed to return home. This assurance has been given. Then also there has been talks with the UAE leadership, and let's see whether the US sticks by their word or not. On the other hand, 113 people have been killed in the last 24 hours. The Gaza toll has hit 22,835, while 8 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank. 2 Palestinian journalists have also been killed in Gaza in the last 24 hours in a targeted Israeli strike. This, and of course, we also have the ICJ, very important issue that it will be discussed on the 11th and the 12th, that is this week, that has been brought forward by South Africa against Israel. Will that have any consequences? Well, that will also be part of our second story. Then we'll be talking about Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who secured her 4th term, ladies and gentlemen, in a controversial election. She will serve for another 5 years in office after a party, the Awami League, and her allies won 223 out of the 300 parliamentary seats that were contested. Although the opposition Bangladesh National Party boycotted the poll, Ms. Hasina's party and allies are expected to win the remaining seats as well. But of course, the opposition has been saying that this is a controversial election. As far as the polls are concerned, the percentage of people who voted this time is 40% compared to almost double in the last elections. This also, of course, let's see how all of this moves along as far as Bangladesh is concerned and its stability is concerned. Finally, we'll be talking about the first US mission in decades that is set to launch today, if it hasn't launched by now. The first American spacecraft to attempt to land on the moon in around half a century is poised to blast off early on Monday, and of course there's a 12-hour difference between the US and Pakistan, so we never know, maybe a bit later in the evening. This time the private industry is also leading the change. A brand new rocket, the United Launch Alliance Vulcan Centaur, will be lifting off from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station at around 2:18 a.m. for its maiden voyage, carrying Astrobotics Peregrine lunar lander. The weather so far remains favorable, so of course it seems as if things are on the right track. These are the stories for today. Let's begin with our first, and that concerns terrorism. Pakistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan that are at the hub of this, the latest being the policemen who were guarding a polio team that were targeted in a remote bomb, and of course as a result of which 5 people lost their lives and more than 22 were injured. Some of them are in critical state. TTP has claimed responsibility for the blast as per various media sources, and a statement has also apparently been issued by the TTP spokesperson. The nationwide anti-polio drive of varied duration has begun from today to administer vaccine to children under the age of 5 years. We've been joined in the studio by our guest AVM Ijaz Malik Saab. He's a senior analyst. Thank you very much, AVM Saab.
Thank you.
When you talk of such incidents, doesn't come as a surprise, but of course what comes as a surprise is that this time those who are guarding polio workers are targeted. What was the intention this time behind the attack that happened in Mahmoud in Bajaur?
I think this kind of attack, obviously it is a continuation of what surge we have seen in the last year in 2023, wherein we had around 600 such attacks and 950 plus casualties and so many other injured. But this particular attack probably would have three objectives. One is, of course, they are pursuing their narrative against polio campaign. Because they have been very vocal and they have a narrative, they have a certain reservation about the dispensation of this polio vaccine. So this is in sync with that previous their stance on it. Secondly, as you just mentioned in your intro, they want to discredit the law enforcement and demoralize them. And third, and I think more importantly, is the media coverage. Because this particular attack brings them, twice the media coverage if it was on a normal, law enforcement.
And of course, the international media also covers it because it's the polio.
Because it is the polio. Just see, Al Jazeera has picked up some Western.
All the major agencies
they have picked up. So by this attacking, I mean, if they had attacked a van in somewhere else in KP. That wouldn't have.
So the attention is media interest and as much media attention as possible. But what do they stand to gain from it?
Actually, their stated stance is that they once they unilaterally walked out from that ceasefire agreement, they demanded from Pakistan government to restore the previous status of the erstwhile FATA agencies. And they want that area to be vacated by the law enforcement, and actually they want to revert back the status administratively and socially as it was going on just about 2 decades back. So they want to discredit the government, they want to challenge the writ of the state of Pakistan, and any such activity which brings them to limelight with reference to any agency, in this case Bajaur agency, any previous agencies of FATA. So that create the kind of maybe some goodwill for certain dissident elements within the population, because definitely they do have their synthesizer in that area. That's why they operate so frequently and so at liberty. So I think they just want to show their relevance in this particular region.
But you remember in the past they did have a stronghold in Bajaur, and then of course came the operations, the very important operations that our armed forces held against all such elements, and so they were no longer in charge, or they had no longer the stronghold in Bajaur. Are they attempting to regain control of areas?
Actually, now
in
I think our strategy, while our policy remains the same, but operational strategy is a bit changed. Now mostly we are conducting only, I mean, the larger campaigns are over because we do not have that kind of threat anymore. But against such elements, we are conducting intelligence-based operations, which are mostly either reactive or on certain intel-based tip from human intelligence. So that gives them that kind of space where their sleeper cells can be activated, and obviously they have support of their counterparts in Afghanistan and certain other certain other powers who want to destabilize Pakistan.
Our caretaker Prime Minister Anwar Kakar Saab says that the terrorists will never succeed in their nefarious designs. How important is for the nation, the public and our forces, everybody to stand as one against such elements?
Exactly. I mean, our past experience has shown post the attack in APS, once whole of the nation got together, all various segment of our political elite, be it the opposition or the treasury benches, they all signed unanimously the National Action Plan in 2014, and we had conducted 2 massive operations, Operation Zarb-e-Azm and then Radul Fasad. So whole of the nation approach, I think a caretaker Prime Minister's statement is really a policy statement which truly represent the sentiment of majority of Pakistan, because we may have a fraction who have some sympathies because of their own vested interest with such elements. Otherwise, majority of our mainstream politicians and public at large, everybody condemns such activity and they want it to be resolved.
All right. AVM Sahab, also our caretaker Prime Minister, you were talking of him, has said that people should not be deceived by any negative propaganda regarding polio vaccine. He said Al-Azhar University and scholars from all over the world have endorsed the anti-polio program. Most of the time in the past as well, when polio workers or their near and dear have been attacked by militants, there is this huge a narrative that is being built that this is a Western tool to spy on them, that it makes Muslims infertile and so on and so forth. When even Muslim scholars stand behind the polio vaccines, why is this narrative still prevalent in areas?
Actually, in our culture where population is seen as an asset in our agro-based economy and society, I think people are very sensitive about their fertility. So they were building narrative on that there is some kind of infertility, but obviously it was baseless. And then if you recall the OBL operation, that again served in their favor, because the campaign which was being run by then Dr. Afridi, that was fake polio campaign. So that somehow made a kind of window for them, which they exploited, that this is again in the larger agenda of the Western powers. And also they are playing on, it reminds me of 1857, that they have been building the narrative that there is some kind of ingredients which are extracted out of pork or some
and the Western tool to spy on them, even this is still a narrative that is prevalent.
So, and I think the best counter narrative is that we capitalize and we utilize our masajid. I mean, in that culture, particularly the masjid, the imam masjid, the sermons given from the
local mosque,
that will have a tremendous effect on the public. So social media could be utilized, the campaign on mainstream media, print and electronic media, but the most effective would be if we bring all these messages on board. I think they can be very useful to create a goodwill for us.
All right. Bajaur, this is not the first time that we've heard the incident this year of something happening in Bajaur. We remember what happened on the JUIF workers as well, and that happened last year, but a couple of months back, in which, of course, there were huge casualties as well. Is there a deliberate attempt to target Bajaur as well, and if so, should we strengthen the security apparatus over there?
I will not be in a position to really comment that why is it specific to Bajaur.
That was not claimed by the TTP, by the way. That was claimed by another.
Another, obviously. But maybe there can be only two things, or maybe combination of both. One is that their sleeper cells presence in the under the masking within that human terrain in any particular agencies. That is one factor. And secondly, their handler, because they are coming from across the border, that's for sure. So the easy access into any of these, because barring two agencies, remaining agencies all had their porous border with Afghanistan. So access to that area and the presence readily available sleeper cell, this combination, I think, that gives them the opportunity to operate freely.
You talk of Afghanistan, I'd like to point my next question towards our neighborhood country. This deliberate attempt to destabilize Pakistan through different organizations, TTP, ISIK, comes through Afghanistan. There's an infiltration of terrorist elements from our neighborhood country. Isn't it Afghanistan's responsibility to curtail such elements from infiltrating neighborhood countries? Shouldn't they be reminded of the first statement that was said by the interim foreign minister Amir Muttaqi, that their land will not be used against any other country in the neighborhood?
Right after Doha Accord, they have been giving such statements, but practically we do not see anything moving in that direction on ground. In my assessment, as a student or observer of Pak-Afghan relationship, there are two things. One is that they really do not have an overall control beyond Kabul. So that is one issue. And in this particular case, I am of the firm belief that even they lack intent to do anything against the TTP. Because if you trace back their origins, they have a lot of convergence of interest, and they would never like to displease them at the cost of improving relationship with Pakistan.
All right, so it's not just Pakistan, there are also other countries that have been targeted, Iran included, and the infiltration of elements goes through Afghanistan. I'd like to refer to what Afghan Prime Minister Mullah Hassan Akhund said today, and he said this to our JUIF Chief Maulana Fazlur Rehman. He said, quote unquote, Kabul did not intend to harm Pakistan or any other country. Then there is a statement that is issued by the Afghan government spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid that quotes Mullah Hassan as saying that Islamic Emirate will not allow anyone to pose a threat to any country, quote unquote. What's your take on these statements?
I would say that these are just I would say a half-baked attempt to show their diplomatic skills. Otherwise, nothing on ground, because
nothing reflects what they just said.
Exactly. They had ample time. I mean, world has conditioned the acceptance of Kabul regime with certain very basic things. I mean, if they had just shown the intent to do and shown little bit of progress, that they were moving in that direction, I think there are countries who are willing to give them legitimacy and give them economic assistance, which they badly need, because end of the day there is a human crisis in Afghanistan. They lack medical facilities, they lack infrastructure development, they lack social sector development. So they cannot do it at their own. So they have.
And how long will they continue this posture? This is what I'm trying to understand, because they are not only angering and have been angering Pakistan because of the infiltration of such elements, but other countries are also now being affected by it, Iran for one. And the fact is that other countries are also extremely skeptic, in China included, about such elements.
I mean, I was just about to talk about China. China has, almost informally recognized them. The kind of investment they are making there, and the kind of exchanges they have made, and China really want to engage them, but because China has the East Turkestan movement, ETIM is a threat to them. But they are not even thinking. I think the sanity should prevail on them. There were people right sitting here in the same studio once. They took over. The people said that there were some commentators who were overjoyed that they are not the same Taliban and they are very much now.
But I think time has proven that they were exactly the same.
I was of the opinion even at that time that we should not just jump on conclusion. I mean, the actions speak louder than the word, and unfortunately, I always wish that I should be proven wrong, but unfortunately they did exactly what any extrapolation of their conduct, governance and foreign policy and security, they have done exactly the same.
AVM Sahib, should Pakistan remold its counter-terrorism strategy in the wake of incidents that have been happening in KP and in Balochistan? Do you feel the current National Action Plan or the current operationalization of agencies such as NACTA is sufficient enough for that? And what should be Pakistan's modus operandi this year as far as counter-terrorism is concerned?
Actually, definitely we need to revise our Afghan policy. Our strategy should be reviewed against the emerging and contemporary threats. Secondly, we have to give special attention to the effort by, I would say, India and some others as well, to nurture our fault lines. If you just correlate these things with what's happening in Balochistan, what has happened in past few months in Balochistan, and with reference to Balochistan all over the country, which is culminated in Islamabad. At one time we had 3 stations or 3 locations. We had a strike and protest around Chaman, we had a complete shutdown in Quetta, and we had a massive congregation of people trying to approach Islamabad on the same context of Baloch sentiment. So these fault lines are being nurtured because they want to create instability in Pakistan. They always want that, and they keep on pursuing. But now it has to be, we have to see it through the prism of CPEC, that anything happening in Balochistan, any instability in our region, which is around the roots of CPEC, that is directly going to affect not only the pace of development, our relationship with China, as well as the socio-economic development, which is hinged upon CPEC.
All right. What should be the role of the regional countries as well? As I told you earlier, we discussed that Iran is now susceptible to these attacks from Afghanistan, and China has its apprehensions as well. Should we join forces, create some kind of deterrent to the infiltration of such terrorist elements from Afghanistan, or put pressure on the Afghan government?
I think the first stage should be that we should develop, because ECO is not, I think, much relevant in that context, but on the similar lines, we should develop a group or an alliance in this region, first of all, who should gel together against terrorism in this region. And then they can devise the methodology and operational plans where they share intelligence, where they share resources, and where they prove their commitment to help each other against this menace, because it's not only our concern. Obviously, we are facing the brunt, and we have suffered the most in this region, or in fact globally, but the other countries, Iran, China, and even Central Asian countries, they also are affected or may be affected because of this in short term.
So I think the strategy should be a joint one of the regional countries who are or could be affected by this infiltration of terrorist elements from Afghanistan, so that if Afghan government does not want to stop them, at least we can stop them together as one.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, AVM Ijaz, Malik, Sub-Defense Analyst, to have joined us in the studios, to have come all the way. And thank you for your very valuable input as far as these elements are concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, let's come to our second story, and that concerns the Israel-Palestine conflict that has now entered its 94th day. The death toll has topped 23,000. Over 9,600 children are among those who have been killed by the Israeli forces. 250 have been killed, 510 have been wounded in Israeli attacks in the past 24 hours alone. We've been joined online by Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry Saab. He's a former Foreign Secretary and, of course, Foreign Affairs Analyst as well. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. Welcome to Newsroom. Let's come to directly to of course, the casualties, the figures that we see. When you look at the figures, 250 killed, 510 wounded in the past 24 hours, when you see that the number of people killed, massacred is the word I should use, by the Israeli forces have topped 23,000. Why, in your point of view, is the world not reacting as it should to this genocide?
Yeah, I agree with you. One wonders why. But I have also seen that the people of the world, all across, East and West, North and South, have actually spoken, including in the United States and in Europe, that this madness must stop, that there should be a permanent ceasefire. But unfortunately, the governments have not really uh, mm, spoken with the same kind of zeal that their people have spoken. And I've seen that there is considerable geopolitics still going on, and that is why we have not been able to stem the hands of Israel from shedding the blood of so many Palestinians, including, as you said, 9,000 children. So yes, there are
9,600 children.
voices. Sorry.
9,600 children is our sub.
9,600 children. So there are voices, but I think the governments need to be mobilized more. Some governments are coming along, like in Europe, but I think a lot needs to be done to persuade them to really weigh in heavily against Israeli actions.
Now, speaking of persuasion, Aizaz Saab, the role of the US seems extremely important. We see the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken visiting the Middle East. He's met with the King of Jordan, where he's assured him that there will be no displacement of Palestinians in the other countries. He has also held a meeting with the Emirati President Mohammed bin Zayed, in which they discussed efforts to prevent Israel's war on Gaza widening and discussed humanitarian needs as well. Are these just statements, or will there be some concrete action that will be seconding these statements?
Well, I hope there will be some action by the US. So far, the United States had extended a firm support to Israel, which had emboldened it to do what it is doing. And my sense was that Israel wanted to create a greater Israel by expelling or creating conditions by which all these people would either move to Egypt or to Jordan and become refugees. Now, both these countries made it very clear that we will not accept refugees, that the Palestinians have a right to live in their own lands. And I think this firmness, this firm response from the neighboring Arab states may have worked with the Americans. The second thing is that Americans had spent considerable political capital on starting the Arab-Israel normalization process in 2020 through Abrahamic Accords. And now all that has been halted for now. We don't know how long. So I think there is an opportunity cost that the US is paying. And I hope that this time Secretary Blinken, when he comes to visit the region, which he's doing at this moment, it would be for this purpose to take back home a very firm response from all these Arab countries that the hands of the Israelis must be stemmed, and Palestinians are not going anywhere. They're going to stay right there in Palestinian lands.
Speaking of diplomacy, I'd like to add a little bit to it. Italy's foreign minister, Mr. Tajani, says that the G7 countries should reduce civilian casualties in Gaza and pressurize Israel to end its military operations in the enclave. German foreign minister Annalena Baerbock also says that Israel must protect Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Will this diplomacy also have some kind of effect? Because we talked about the US, but what about the European Union?
Very important. The Europeans initially, as you know, were extending the support to Israel in the name of so-called self-defense. But when the argument was exposed that you cannot call it self-defense, you are talking of an occupying power which had pushed all these people to war, and they had a right to act in resistance to occupation. And thereafter, I think slowly and gradually, first Spain spoke, hats off to the Spanish government. And then now we see others are also pouring in. And if that pressure builds up, it will have an impact on the position of the US as well. So yes, diplomacy can work provided we all keep raising these voices against the atrocities being committed by Israel.
Now let's talk of Israel's internal politics. We all know that Israel's opposition is also putting a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. They're saying that his policies are completely incorrect. There's a lot of revolt from inside of Israel, from the Israelis themselves, the public, that also does not want what is happening to happen, to continue to happen. Then there is Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the National Security Minister of Israel, who is unhappy with the comments of the Defense Minister that he made about limiting the scope of war. Is Israel's hardline government becoming more unstable?
I think so. My own reading is that the most decisive factor will be a revulsion against what Israel is doing, and that revulsion will be internally, because it is already affecting many Jews who are moving out of Israel. It is also affecting businesses which are moving out of Israel. The cost of the war is prohibitive. I have been told that hundreds of millions of dollars per day are being spent. So yes, the pinch is increasing. The right-wing government of Netanyahu is coming under increasing pressure, and my sense is, and if I can predict that I think Netanyahu will be history. He will be gone, because this is not sustainable, and I hope that it happens sooner than later, because we need those save those precious lives from these extremely far-right extremists.
Or Aizaz, also, let's talk about the humanitarian angle. Doctors Without Borders says, as far as the situation of the hospitals in Gaza is concerned, there's only one hospital that is working properly, and that is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, not the mosque, the hospital in central Gaza. Therein also, that is being bombarded by the Israeli forces, and the situation is extremely dire. Shouldn't at least hospitals be allowed to function? Because we know most of the hospitals have already been destroyed or are non-functional, or the medicine cannot arrive in those, and the people cannot even perform the surgeries without anesthesia, because there is no anesthesia available. The children are being amputated as we speak. I just fail to understand this angle, this humanitarian angle of the war in Palestine, and how it is being let go of so openly.
Well, even in wars, rules of the war state very clearly that you cannot bombard hospitals. But Israel did so on the pretext that there were tunnels underneath. But frankly, they could not show there were any tunnels there. So that clearly means that whatever they have done now falls in the realm of genocide, in the realm of crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, whatever you call it. And I think hospitals, bombarding hospitals, is something that will continue to haunt the conscience of Israel for a long time.
Or there's a report also I'd like to refer to you, this report. And that, before we go to that, I'd like to refer to the United Nations General Assembly and the United Nations. It is going to meet tomorrow to discuss the US vetoing an amendment to the UN Security Council resolution on the 22nd of December. This amendment is being proposed by Russia. How important is the United Nations and it to show its proper might and its efficiency in this day and age under the present situation?
I don't really measure United Nations performance in terms of might, because it is just a forum. It is not a world government. However, it is a barometer of measuring where the world stands. And as you know, in the UN General Assembly, from 120 120 countries supporting ceasefire, the number increased to 153 in the second resolution. So my sense is that the pressure of the world community is becoming very evident in the UN voting patterns. And if this amendment carries through and United States also has a change of heart, my sense is that United Nations will be able to at least persuade the government of Israel to stop the war immediately and let the humanitarian assistance flow in.
What happens to the two-state solution, Aizaz? Is there any future for that?
Well, two-state solution was imposed on the Palestinians in 1947 when Britain took the matter to the UN. Even at that time, all countries from Global South, including Pakistan, spoke vehemently that Palestinians should not be evicted and that they should have their own Palestine, their own state. but the resolution came that both countries, there should be two states, and willy-nilly Palestinians and others came to sort of accept that, but not Israel. Israel has never accepted the two-state solution and has never allowed that solution to work. And as a consequence of that, Israel is now in violation of international law, is in violation of against the will of the entire world. And I hope that the United States takes cognizance of this kind of belligerent behavior of its most favored nation in the Middle East.
Which brings me again back to the ICJ. The ICJ's 15-judge panel, which will be expanded by an additional judge from each side in the Israel case. It does deal with broader disputes and increasing cases brought by states. But Israel says that the claim that was brought about by South Africa is baseless, and the government spokesperson accused South Africa of absurd blood libel or baseless allegations of Jewish perfidy intended to stir up lethal hatred of Jews. What's your comment on that?
How can you say that these are baseless allegations? I mean, the whole world can see what's going on there. The only argument that Israel would probably have in the ICJ would be that it was an act of self-defense. But that has now been exposed because it was an occupying force which had tormented the people under occupation for so long. And therefore, that argument will also not hold water. Hats off to the government of South Africa for standing tall on this matter and taking the matter to ICJ. I think all countries of the world should support that. I think Pakistan government should also support that very, very forcefully, because that's the right thing to do.
The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees says its facilities have been attacked 220 times since the beginning of the war, and this includes 63 direct hits. All the humanitarian organizations working within the ambits of Palestine have also said that they provided their GPS coordinates to the Israeli forces, and despite that, they were still targeted. What is the game plan as far as Israel is concerned? And are they going out of bounds? What is the basic mindset that is going on? And I'd like to understand this from a seasoned diplomat like yourself.
Well, I have been very clear right from the beginning that Israel was trying to take this opportunity to create conditions for a greater Israel, something it had always been desiring. And that's why it has never allowed the two-state solution to function. It was hoping that by extensive bombardment, all these people will somehow disappear, will go somewhere. But that doesn't happen. It won't happen. I mean, the Palestinians have been so resilient for the last 7 decades. Israel is certainly misreading them and not able to really calculate exactly how much resistance that Palestinians can put up. So yes, Israel is trying to create a greater Israel, but I don't think it will succeed. I think the pressure is growing from all over across the world that the two-state solution is the only way to go forward, and Israel will have to live with that solution. It cannot just simply wish these 2.3 million people in Gaza and more than 3 million West Bank to disappear. It won't happen.
Mr. Aizaz, I'd also like to understand, do you feel this conflict is going to become a more regional one? It will extend beyond the ambits of Palestine because of the way different countries are being targeted, which Israel says that, of course, it's targeting certain elements in those countries. Do you feel there's also a deliberate attempt to bring in more people or more countries into this conflict?
Well, 3 months ago, when this all started, and in my very first interview, I had predicted that the ambit of the war will not expand. Okay. And I hold that assessment even today, mainly because no other country in the world and in the region wants to expand the war. Yes, Israel will continue to engage militants in southern Lebanon, in Syria's Golan Heights, but I don't think those countries are willing to join the war, nor is Iran ready to join and expand the circle of war. So while proxy wars will happen, while some kind of activity, militant activity and anti-militant activity will also happen. I don't see any country of the world willing at this stage to expand the circle of war. But the pressure on Israel is growing. It doesn't have to be only through war, but non-kinetic pressure on Israel is also growing. And so I don't see the circle of war expanding, but I do see pressure on Israel growing, and that is what will make it stop this madness.
What do you foresee as far as the conflict is concerned? How much longer is it going to continue before a ceasefire happens? And even if a ceasefire happens, what is the future of such a conflict? Is it a long drawn out one? Are we going to see another decade or two of the same atrocities periodically happening through Israel on the Palestinians? What is your future predicament, or what do you predict as far as this region is concerned?
I think, unfortunately, Israel will continue to subject Palestinians to such atrocities for as long as the United States extends its unqualified support to Israel. So the action of the international community, in my view, is not on Israel alone, but also on the United States. If United States can be persuaded, and that's why I had indicated that the Europeans are very important because they are transatlantic partners of the US. So if the Europeans can put that pressure on Americans, as well as other partners of America from east to west, then you might expect the Israelis to come back to accepting the two-state solution. But they will continue to do what they are doing, and that also means continued instability in the region, even for Israel. And I think Israel is actually signing on to a long period of instability for them unless it changes its track.
Because, of course, when you look at the Israeli defense minister who talks about a post-Gaza, post-conflict plan for Gaza, then we've got Netanyahu who talks about, installing the Israeli military to control Gaza, and you've got other statements, and you've got the previous statements of mowing the lawn. I don't want to go into much detail, but you understand where I'm getting to. What I also don't understand is, Asa, is that these people who call themselves Jews or Israelis, haven't they been subjected to more or less the same torture after the Second World War? Shouldn't they have taken the message and become a more calmer state, a more understanding state, as whenever, this state that we call Israel has been forcefully constructed after 1948. But this said, shouldn't they have learned from their own personal lessons?
I think the tragedy of humanity is that we don't learn lessons. Now, Jews of the world had, especially in Europe, had been persecuted. So, by logic, they should now understand that we cannot afflict the same pains that we suffered on other people, but they did. And I think a lot of geopolitics happened. Britain played a role, starting from Balfour Declaration of 1917, and then continuous influx of European Jews into Palestinians. And if you remember a statement by Winston Churchill in 1937, where he sort of called that a dog in a manger has no right to the manger. So they sort of called them as dogs. So that's the kind of mentality they have adopted, and I hope that they come back to the reality that you cannot force people out of existence, at least not in this day and age. That time is gone, and Israel will get a revulsion, in my view, internally, because there are enough Jewish voices within Israel that will try to persuade this right-winger extremist government not to do what they are doing. And I think this government will be toppled. That's my sense very soon.
All right. Thank you so very much, Ahmad Chaudhry, former Foreign Secretary and Foreign Affairs Analyst, to have joined us and to have talked to us with such candor on this war that has engulfed Palestine, with the number of casualties exceeding 23,000. And of course, as I told you earlier, also 9,600 plus children are amongst those casualties. humanity is something that is extremely important in this day and age, and that should be revered, that should be respected, and without any exception whatsoever. Let's hope better sense prevails. That is all I can say. Let's come to our last two stories. The first concerns Bangladesh, where Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has won her 4th term in a vote that many call controversial. She will serve now for another 5 years in office after her party, the Awami League, and its allies won 223 of the 300 parliamentary seats that had been contested. The BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, was the main opposition party that had boycotted the poll. Apparently, it seems that now Ms. Hasina's party and allies are expected to win the remaining seats as well. BNP alleges the poll was a sham. Sunday's result also comes after mass arrests of BNP leaders and supporters. The percentage of the voters this year in the elections was around 40% compared to almost double of that in the last elections. So let's see how this term comes as far as Ma'am Sheikh Hasina is concerned. Let's come to our last story, and that concerns the US's first moon landing since Apollo. That is going to happen. The rocket must already have gone past. The first American spacecraft to attempt to land on the moon is more than half a century, ladies and gentlemen. As I think, if not right now, will be blasting off very, very soon today. But in this day and age, it's the private circle, the private industry that is leading the charge as far as that is concerned. United Launch Alliance's Vulcan Centaur will be lifting off from Cape Canaveral Space Station around 2:18 a.m. I said that in the beginning as well, for its maiden voyage, carrying Astrobotics Peregrine lunar lander. And if everything goes on as planned, the Peregrine will touch down on a mid-latitude region of the moon, which is known as Sinus Viscostatis, or Bay of Stickiness, on the 23rd of February this year. Of course, it's interesting news. It's interesting news for those who want to explore the space and want to know what the moon is all about. And of course, there are different missions that go in order to search for sometimes life, sometimes for better understanding of our solar system as well. It is a challenging task, and as I had told you before as well, there are certain controversies regarding that with the Red Indian tribes as well. The Navajo Nation, America's largest indigenous tribe, has said sending certain elements to the moon desecrates a body that is sacred to their culture, and have pleaded for the cargo's removals, a part of that cargo. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of today's Newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories, segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.